Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to hopefully make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up discussions today. We've got Coin up 8% on news. It will enter the S&P 500. Legendary will break that down. We've got Bitcoin Magazine CEO David Bailey announcing a merger with Kindly MD, a company to create a company focused on the Bitcoin treasury strategy. So many companies adopting this approach. We have Stats with us today as well, who I know has some thoughts on that. Cannot wait to get into that discussion too. And we've got Pump Fund introducing revenue sharing for token creators as launchpad wars heat up. Rahim will break that down a little bit, as well as place that in a bit of context. This launch coin stuff is going a little bit crazy. The internet capital markets, I believe, are back. That is the news there. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto NFTs as usual. And we're going to talk the usual general thoughts. But before we get there, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is very, very risky. We don't know anything for sure. So please proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, as I said, special guest with us today, Stats. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Good to have you back with us.
What's going on? It's good to be back, like the good old days. I'm okay. It's early here, so that's the only downside, but I kind of like the forcing function to wake up and talk about markets. So yeah, here we are.
Good stuff. For whatever reason, it always seems to be the case that the people who the show attracts, it's never someone for whom it's convenient on the East Coast. It's always like people who need to get up at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, Brett does this I think at 5 o'clock in the morning. Or it might even be 4. I can't remember.
4.
I think he does it at 4 in the morning every day. But they're also the kind of people who will do it for that specific reason, where it's like, right, let's just get going.
I like the mornings. You know, I got 3 kids, and the mornings is like time without them. Although I get 7 hours of school without them too. So, but I've always kind of liked the mornings. Yeah.
Me too. Me too. Big morning person. Someone who is not a morning person. Rahim, do you wanna confess your timetable that you told me the other day? I was absolutely shocked.
It's a confession because you know this. You've experienced Dubai. That Dubai in general.
I don't think I knew the extent of it though. I don't think I knew the extent of it.
Yeah, I mean, like Dubai in general has like a very evening lifestyle just because of the weather. So it's like part of our culture. So even if you go to like a coffee shop on a Monday at like 12 a.m., you'll see it like packed with people and stuff. So in general, I live like a very opposite lifestyle where I go to the gym at 12 a.m. in the night. It just helps me because like I don't have any meeting clashes. I don't have any social hangs that are clashing. It helps me keep disciplined. I kind of keep up with Eastern time zones a bit. And it kind of just like works and stuff. I know it might sound crazy to you guys, but when you guys move here, you guys will learn. You guys will learn.
Absolutely insane. I think I was just muted for a second. Ledge, is the audio okay? Just checking in with people in the spaces. I've seen some comments. Is it okay?
Yeah. Funky is thumbs upping, so it seems to work, and I hope that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Diablito also says he has audio now on spaces. Awesome.
Perfect. Excellent. All good. Checking with you, Ledge. All good. Ready to get into the show?
Yeah, I'm excited. You know, I love the Full House.
Full House vibes are excellent vibes. Happy to have the Full House. But let's get into it as usual. I've got a lot to talk about today. So as usual, starting with the price action on the majors, pretty chilled out, to be honest. Have I frozen? I've frozen a little bit, or I'm okay? I'm good on the audio.
You're good on the audio. You're frozen a bit on the video, but audio is perfectly fine.
That's fine. I'll just keep talking then when I freeze slightly. Bitcoin is down 1% at $103,000. ETH is down a few percent to 2.4K. Down 3%. XRP is up 4% to $2.50. BNB is down 4% to $6.50. Solana is down 1% to $173. Getting into the meme coin side of things, we have everything red, mostly red. Lots of green yesterday, but today it's kind of corrected. Still hugely up on the last 7 days. Doge is down 8, SHIB is down 10, Pepe's down 5, Trump's down 11, Bonk's down 7, Fartcoin's down 3, WIF's down 6. But something like WIF, for example, is up 114 on the week. So just to give people context, like still in a humongous uptrend, I think, here, or compared to what it was for sure. Pengu, for example, is down 1%, but still up 30% as well. SPX down 5% on the day, but up 58% on the week. Just to call out, there's been these other coins in the launch coin ecosystem that have been absolutely sending. So launch coin itself has gone to 100 mil. This was 15 mil like yesterday, I think. I think we'll break down what that is in just a little bit. So we'll talk about that in a second. But that's pretty aggressive price action. Getting into the headlines themselves, we have, as we said, coin is up 8% on news. It will enter the S&P 500. Bitcoin Magazine CEO is going to be pursuing this Bitcoin treasury strategy. They've raised 710 million to buy Bitcoin, just buy Bitcoin. That's the point of the company. And then finally, Pump Fund introduces revenue sharing for token creators as the launchpad wars heat up. Talking of those launchpad wars, as I said, Launchcoin is up 464% to 92 mil. This is in the Believe ecosystem. And the reason, there are basically many Web 2 builders launching coins there with working products. Nikita Beer is involved, and he is someone who is very much celebrated in the Web 2 world as like this great app developer, super virality creator. And he's kind of working in that ecosystem. So that's, I think, some of the reason why people suddenly got so excited about it. Some other interesting price action there. Degen in the Farcaster ecosystem is up 62%. Kaito's up another 10%, pushing back towards $2 now. Remember the lows there were like 80 cents. So, there was some green as well. Whilst a lot of the memes, the pure memes pulled back today, there was some other things really popping off. Legendary, is there anything to catch up on the NFT side before we get to the rest of the roundup?
Yeah, taking a quick look at the NFT majors, to be honest, not a very spectacular day. Mostly red for Pudgy Penguins, down 3%, Duels down another 6%. Jirasan is now down 14% on the day, 40% on the week. That is to do with the redacted coin launch, which just happened a couple of hours ago. So mostly red today, with the exception, and Stats had posted about that yesterday, if I remember correctly, of the V1 CryptoPunks, which I very much like. And they are up quite a lot on the week. I think they're up more than 20%.
Like it. Stats, you're giving something a little smile there. Is that any NFT price action catching your attention?
No, totally unrelated. Just waking up and seeing what people said last night. So yeah.
Right, good stuff. Getting into the rest of the roundup, we had some other interesting news across the space. Some institutional, some more on the Degen side. The first federally chartered crypto bank, Anchorage Digital, has moved into the stablecoin business with its acquisition of Mountain Protocol. You had Animoca Brands planning a US listing. CEO Yatsu revealed in an interview yesterday. So I think the more favorable environment, the more favorable regulatory environment is encouraging people in that regard. I think Paradigm revealed quite an interesting protocol yesterday, Multiverse Finance, which is the opportunity to use your bets in prediction markets as collateral. The idea being, if you want to bet no against something that's going to happen in 6 months' time, that's a long time to have your collateral like tied up. So the idea is to be able to use that no bet, or the value of that no bet, as collateral in other things. So that's this newly designed protocol. Sailor Strategy buys another $1.34 billion worth of Bitcoin. Absurd. Huge numbers there. Redacted, as Legendary just said, announced their token will go live today. He just mentioned, I think they're trading at 40, 50 mil, Ledge. What was that? 60 mil?
Need to check the updated number.
Okay. I think it came out at 60 mil, and maybe it was a bit of a drawdown at the start. In some other news, just wrapping things up, New York mayor proclaimed New York City to be open for business for those in the crypto industry. There's going to be an inaugural crypto summit later this month. Abstract has announced it will be have full EVM equivalence, which means that teams with previously audited protocols can deploy without worrying about code changes now. And finally, a blast from the past, sad piece of news. Blast does not renew its service agreement with multi-sig safe, but however, they are building their own multi-sig functionality into Blast Mobile. I think a lot of people took that as like a negative thing, because Safe is a very respected multi-sig wallet, but apparently they're building their own version of this to operate, and I think going for just all in on the mobile experience. So that is that. Legendary. Before we get into the main stuff today, is there anything catching your attention here from the other bits of news?
Yeah, two things I want to touch on. First of all, the question you asked, Redacted is currently trading at 5.1 cents, so a bit more than 50 mil. I had invested actually, waited more than a year, 400 days for the TGE to happen, but I can't claim because I don't have the ledger with me. And I'm very surprised that I used this particular ledger to invest in because I typically use a completely different wallet. So I will have to wait a couple more days until I'm home and see what that means for my own personal allocation. The more interesting thing, however, that I wanted to comment on as well is the Anchorage Digital news and Mountain Protocol. Mountain Protocol is a stablecoin issuer issuing USDM, which is a yield-bearing stablecoin, not too well known, just sitting above a 130 mil market cap. However, as part of the deal, USDM won't be minted anymore in the future, and the rewards from the yield-bearing stablecoin, they will only remain active for another 30 days, but then that will drop to zero. And just to put that in a bit more context, Mountain Protocol recently had raised 8M in a Series A round. So interesting to see that they obviously Anchorage Digital, like either the regulatory stack or the tech stack behind the yield-bearing stablecoin, but obviously the name USDM for Mountain Protocol won't continue like that and will be integrated in Anchorage.
Interesting. Good stuff. Appreciate that. Stats. Before we get into the main stuff, we're going to be talking about Pump Fun and the treasury companies and Coinbase in a second. Anything else, either from the Roundup or just anything in general? We haven't touched base in a while. What's kind of catching your attention in the market at the moment? What's interesting you or not interesting you?
I mean, broadly speaking, just we were in such a bull market for meme coins, 6 months ago. And I say like the idea of Bitcoin dominance, and is the overall ecosystem going to bounce back? And if so, is it new narratives or not? Like, it feels like we're kind of ripe for a new narrative still. Like, we haven't quite figured out what the guys like Legendary, who are constantly finding the meta of the moment and making money. Every time I'm not making money, I just go into our WhatsApp group and Legendary is making money. And, but I feel like, we had the meme coin moment, and then we had the AI coin moment. And, and it started to feel about a month ago, like the market was just kind of sick of some of these things, in the sense that, yes, you can make some quick money, but at the end of the day, most people get stuck with the bag and don't do well over any like intermediate term. So I'm kind of curious what is emerging now as the next thing that keeps people entertained in this space outside of like the majors. And, do any of these kind of subtle kind of things that are popping up have bigger picture potential to really dominate the headlines? I don't know. That's kind of, I guess, the big picture question on my mind. But beyond that, I like watching. I'm very interested in, crypto did poorly yesterday while the stock market's absolutely ripped. And is crypto going to trade more like gold or more like stocks, which have been pretty negatively correlated over the past month, 2 months, gold and stocks, like an actual negative correlation. And crypto, for the first time ever, has started to, show signs that it might be a bit more gold-like than stocks, which would be a huge change. So that's something that's kind of also on my mind.
Just we'll definitely get to the next meta stuff in a second, but just double clicking on that second part. What's your view been on that then? Like, I think for a long time, historically, as much as people would like Bitcoin to behave as some type of safe haven in bad times, in the end, it's basically always sold off in challenging times. How are you making sense of this kind of slight decoupling from stocks in a way? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're right. Over time, people have always wanted the Bitcoin inflation hedge narrative to be real. And it just, in some ways, all risk assets are inflation hedges, or can trade like inflation hedges. So crypto did a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, it was very correlated with NASDAQ and just kind of broad risk appetite in the marketplace. I think when gold had just such a multi-standard deviation move, and you saw gold really during a time where people really got the feeling that the US was losing interest in kind of being the financial hub of the world, that the the Trump administration was less interested in U.S. dollar supremacy, you started to see gold completely take off in a way that it has been quite rare over the past few decades. The speed of the move that we saw in gold. And at that point, no one likes to buy the chart that's had a multi-standard deviation move. No one likes to buy, the chart that's up 50% over the past 6 months. So people started looking for alternatives, and Bitcoin in almost every conversation was kind of like a natural second, third choice. And people really started to see it. Maybe this is kind of going to be a bit more of act as a bit more of a reserve currency type role, and you started to see a play on the price. So I think it was really a function of how well gold did and how much kind of the administration in the U.S. was surprising people, and people looking for alternative kind of safe haven assets, and Bitcoin just started to become part of that conversation in a way that it hasn't really in the past.
Yeah, I think that's right. One of the interesting things I saw yesterday, which has not appeared on crypto Twitter hugely, I don't think, but it is something that people are generally obsessed with. Yeah, this was published yesterday, so I'm just going to share this for a second. We'll rely on my US correspondents to confirm or deny this, but for a long period of time, people kind of bought the narrative or started to buy the narrative that this administration was going to be like super responsible. We're going to start like really cutting costs and things are going to get tight, and it's not about Wall Street anymore, it's about Main Street. And I think this maybe piece of news yesterday suggests that it might just be more of the same, and maybe that's to be expected, but I think it is relevant, and I haven't heard anyone say it yet. They said that the House GOP unveils plan to raise the debt limit by $4 trillion. It says House Republicans are moving forward with plans to raise the nation's debt ceiling by $4 trillion as part of a larger plan to advance President Trump's tax agenda. Stats, do you have any thoughts in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there was this whole idea, especially because Doge was kind of constantly releasing different ways that they were going to cut the national budget. They became this thing everyone got obsessed with, was the idea of the U.S. cutting their national budget. At the end of the day, in the first 100 days, this spending was up $200 billion year on year. By contrast, tariffs are about $15 billion per month, kind of at their peak right now. So simply the incremental spending that America has done in the first 100 days of this administration, shows very little sign that we're about to have some heyday of controlled spending. That said, the first 100 days, who knows? It's like there's a lot of early stuff. A lot of it's already baked in for the past year. I wouldn't say that you can really draw that much conclusion from that. I wouldn't read too much into that headline. There's always a song and dance in the US where we're constantly needing to raise the debt limit. And every single year, the opposition party tries to create problems because the idea, if Congress doesn't raise the debt limit, then basically government shuts down, because it's not like we're going to straight declining the debt immediately, or sure. So you every single year, every other year, you need to raise the debt limit, and it's always a bit of a political clusterfuck where one side, the opposition, tries to make the party in control look bad, and it happens on both sides. So right now, Republicans just don't want to have to deal with this, like the risk of shutting down the government. There is a faction within the Republican Party that does like to use this as a point of leverage, even though the Republicans are in control, like the ones who want to be more aggressive on cutting spending. But broadly speaking, this is a song and dance that happens all the time. And it's a bit of a political bargaining tool more than it is anything else, because there was no illusion that we were going to get to a place here where we didn't need to raise the debt limit. That was always a given, and it was actually something Trump wanted to push forward, like a 4-year, because he just doesn't want this kind of like fight sort of blemish that happens with every president when they can't necessarily get it done. So I wouldn't read too much into that headline, but it's more just political charades and positioning than anything else. But it needs to go higher. That's just part of the trajectory that will probably be on for a little while.
Got it. So debt ultimately will continue to increase. Want to bring Funky
to go from adding trillions of dollars of debt every year to reversing to actually going down in debt. That, like, even if you listen to the All In podcast or whatever, they're not talking about going to a place where it's like immediately going down. They're going to a place where it's only going up a lot less, but you still need to raise that ceiling if you want to pay public employees.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. Funky, your hand was raised. Want to bring you into the conversation here. welcome to the stage, Rahim. What are your thoughts here?
Jim, I mean, Sam covered pretty much everything I was going to say anyhow. But the one thing I will say that I find interesting is, as much as we talked about, the timeline was on fire with Doge and Elon and everything else, there have been some charts that show how little impact Doge has actually had. They made it sound like they're going to cut trillions of dollars from the federal budget. And, they obviously cut billions, which is meaningful. But I think that they've started to realize that this is a giant machine. And for as much as we love to spend, it's very difficult to cut some of these things.
Yeah.
And the other thing is Doge brought out lawsuits. A lot of it, was controversial to the point that it might actually, some of those, the things they try to get rid of could actually lead to more spending, and I think if you actually look at the things that made tons of headlines, it was things that were cutting like $5 to $10 million. It just happened to be about Sesame Street in Iraq or whatever. So it became, a very viral sensation, but the actual numbers behind kind of the big viral sensations weren't always as big as people, especially when you look at like the simple fact that, spending is up $200 billion already in the first 100 days. Cutting Sesame Street from Iraq and those types of things that got a ton of headlines aren't super needle moving in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
Even if they shine light on potential issues that the government had in terms of looseness of spending.
Okay. Good stuff. Good we got to touch on that side. The other thing that you were touching on was like what's happening now, what's keeping people interested right here, right now. Rahim, I think we'll probably like merge the Launchcoin stuff with the Pump Fun news because it's all kind of related. I know you've been participating a lot on the meme coin / culture coin side. I just want to give it like a quick summary of like roughly what is going on in the Launchpad ecosystem, because I think that is the thing that's kind of catching people's attention the most. We've got, I'm going to find the correct tweet here. We've got this tweet from Ansem where he shared, look, the Launchpad wars are heating up pretty aggressively now. We've got Bonk Fun, the like Bonk's Launchpad, which is come to market, and in particular, what's his name? The biggest meme coin trader at the moment.
Bonk guy.
It's in the name. So Bonk.fun is being championed by Bonk guy the most. You've got Boop, obviously, with Dingaling as well. So that's the like other creator focused meme coin platform. You've got this new Believe platform, which is the Launchcoin related one, which is where Launchcoin has gone to 100 mil. I think it's up at 112 now. I'm just seeing on the chart. That was at 15 mil yesterday. And the reason why that's running in the way that it is because, in Ansem's words here, it's the Web2 attention breakout crew, meaning there are some like arguably more competent Web2 founders who've come in and like trying to do something in Web3. Doesn't necessarily mean there's any value accrual to the token, I don't think, but there are some names there that people respect and are attributing some value to. And then, of course, you've got Pump.fun, the OG platform, which is still doing pretty awesome revenue every day. So the Launchcoin stuff is really sending the various coins in there. What do we think here? Rahim, coming to you first. Do you want to bring in any of the information on Pump.fun? How do you want to compare this with the other stuff? I know you've been like super active on taking some of these trades when the memes were bottoming out. Just speak to that whole industry, that whole sector at the moment, and what you think.
I think it's just generally whether you look at like bonk.fun or boop.fun or pump.fun, I guess at this point, is everyone just relying on like the most basic business model that exists in crypto is fees and volume and stuff. Everything else that everyone has tried just hasn't been working, which is why you have these ecosystems doing exactly what, like if you think about the NFT launch pads or like NFT marketplaces, they were kind of doing the same thing. Everyone was coming with their own ecosystems. Initially, they were just platforms, then they turned into launch pads. Their business model wasn't around the idea of, okay, how can we make this coin grow a lot, or how can we make this ecosystem sustainable? Their business model is how can we incentivize more and more people to launch things, because that's what's going to bring us volume, and that's where we make the money. Everyone saw that Pump.fun is easily like one of the best products from a revenue making point of view that came out this cycle. They've done more than $100 million in revenue. You look at Hyperliquid is making $1.52 million a day, and that's why everyone's kind of going on this narrative, whether it's when Base was around this whole idea of like, creator coins. It was just this idea that I think there's this narrative being pushed around of like, how can we normalize for people to launch more and more things. There was this whole bit that Alon, and I think there was some good arguments that he made yesterday on his tweet, who is the founder for Pump.fun, is he was like, we've kind of stigmatized this idea of like launching NFTs or launching coins to the point that it's docs people don't do it anymore. So like literally everyone who's doing it is kind of like undocked. You don't know who the hell are or whatever. And he's essentially just like talking about that we need to change that culture, which, yeah, I don't think it's like a crazy idea for him to put out. However, like if you look at the tweet on the screen, at the end, he talks about his whole idea is for people to launch utility projects, art, live streams from Pump.fun. I don't know how much of that, like utility projects from Pump.fun, I don't know how much do you agree with that narrative. But I just think everyone, whether it's like Dingling with launching Boop.fun, everyone just like narrowing down how can we leverage on the same business model that Binance works, same business model where like OpenSea and all of these platforms did. It just like make money on volume and stuff. So it is a tricky ecosystem because it's just incentivizing people to launch more and more stuff. It's not focusing on sustainability. And I do think it has like a ceiling. Well, all of this crumbles a lot if we don't have an influx of people coming from outside, which is what I think Kaito is doing a fantastic job in helping with distribution in our ecosystem. But I just feel like we have this like launch coin thing. You remember that a couple of months ago, the DeSci ecosystem, where people were raising money for their decentralized science projects, and it was one of the most ridiculous things I've seen in this space. As a former scientist myself, the idea of like people raising money with having no proper KPIs and parameters of how you like really judging and the ethical practices and this and that, I just feel like we've gotten into that mania again. Sure, these platforms will make a lot of money, but I just don't see of how all of this is going to be sustainable.
Good, interesting points. I think what you mentioned about, they say here in that tweet you just referenced, the number one goal is to grow the trenches. In some ways, this is not entirely disconnected from the various arguments that Jesse from Base was making, right? Where he's trying to normalize and say, look, guys, like it's okay. You don't need to be so maybe personally attached to this coin. I think creators naturally are. And I think that's where like a bit of the tension was, because creators felt one way. They were like, look, maybe you don't need to feel this so strongly in that direction. One follow-up though, Rahim, is because I know that you've been taking like some specific actions on the back of all of your thoughts in this specific sector. You've been trading on the culture coin side. Like, how are you making sense of it when in that world that you just described, where there's so much more coming all the time? How are you prioritizing your trades? Like, I think you maybe skew towards the more traditional stuff. Well, traditional as in like maybe past cycles, cults that you like. I don't know. How would you phrase it? Then Ledge, I want to hear your thoughts here as well.
I mean, I'm a man of like numbers. Like, don't like skip all of that over. Like, I think the two ecosystems that are like super interesting to me right now is hands down Hyperliquid. It's an ecosystem that's making revenue on a very recurring basis. It's based on volume. They launch perps for almost every new coin launches and stuff. Like, their business model makes sense. A lot of people don't use sexes. I don't use sexes, so it's definitely an ecosystem I'm looking at. You look at platforms that are focusing on distributions. When you have so much of supply of happening of anything, the goal is always to look at, okay, where's the distribution model coming from, and can you capitalize on that distribution model? It's the same reason I think I'm very bullish on Kaito, because they're solving a fundamental problem that exists in Web3, that you have like these multiple L2s and L1s that are kind of like compartmentalizing audiences in like different groups and stuff. So I am like, yeah, like I think I'm looking for sustainability in the sense that finding some of these like old projects, like I'm heavily bullish on like stuff on the meme side for like Pepe and everything. I just think I would rather do that. It's a lot more decentralized. It has a lot more holders. These new things, yeah, it's like if you're there in the right moment at the right time to catch it, it's great. But like the flavor of the month changes so freaking fast that unless like you have nothing else to do, I don't know, like I missed out a lot of these trades, but I'm actually pretty comfy. You look at Doge. I was talking about this yesterday. Doge added 7 billion market cap in a day. And that's like, no one talks about this. Like, no one on Twitter, no one's talking about Doge, but it added an entire market cap of Pepe in like a single day and stuff. So yeah, like I just feel like there are different pockets of like for you to invest in. You don't necessarily have to just be looking at the, oh, these new creators are talking about the trenches, I need to jump into the trenches. Like, look at some of this older stuff. It's actually like doing really well, and rising tide lifts all boats and stuff. You should be, at this point in time, you should be hedged to lesser risk when it comes to even like memes, because they've been around for a while now.
Interesting. Okay. I take a lot of those points. Obviously, it's just a game of people's allocation decision making. You got to decide. You want to try and catch those early runners where the upside's a bit bigger. But as you say, there's a lot of meat on the trade for some of, you know, the Pepe move, for example, recently, which I think you caught almost all of or most of. It's pretty healthy trade. I think sometimes in the space you just get a bit impatient or jealous, or like you can get you can try and get more than, I don't know, get jealous of the bigger trades, I guess. Legendary, how are you looking at this stuff? Are you seeing opportunity in this are you buying this internet capital markets part 2 is the question. We've had internet capital markets part 1. I think we had the Jelly token launched on Solana and everyone was tweeting that. This now with the this new launchpad, the Believe ecosystem, seems to have some more established builders. Is this internet capital markets 2? How are you thinking about it?
And let me just throw in a quick question for the ignorant among us. What is an internet capital markets and how is it incrementally different versus the game we've been playing for the past decade?
Good question, Legendary.
In my opinion, it's not different from the game we played the last 10 years. We just have now the term of internet capital markets, which we brought back once again. Now we have new launch pads with different incentives, which per se is not bad, because Boop, with the creator sharing that they did, forced the hands of other launch pads, forced the hand of Pump.fun as well to react and adjust. So pretty similar to what Blur did to OpenSea, no matter if you liked or did not like the developments that happened to NFTs. But I don't think it's any different. I also don't believe that this is the new way of fundraising or all the other arguments we made with internet capital markets 1. It is a hype, it is a trend. Rahim's made the perfect point as well with DeSci, decentralized science. I think at the peak of it, we reported on the show that the SAY Foundation raised a 60 mil decentralized science fund to do that. And the only thing that I remember that stemmed from the DeSci era was Euro A, the Eurolithin A token that also just Stefano with the Fly Experiments had mentioned in the YouTube comments. And they actually did a Eurolithin A supplement now that I think you can pre-order. But that's basically it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think there's now more pockets of opportunity with obviously also meme coins on Abstract. We had on AVEX recently ID as an arena runner, and all those launch pads obviously will want to have their own runner as well. Like, it would be great for Boop to have a 100M runner for the people who stake their tokens to create a stronger incentive for others to stake. So I feel like every single one of these launch pads has a simulated and a crew of influencers, of builders, whatever. And now they will try to basically force a runner to show up in their ecosystem on their launchpad as well, to just take away shares from Pump.fun, which ultimately means there's more pockets of opportunity, but it also gets more complex to stay in touch with everything that's going on. And I completely have missed, to be completely honest, that launchpad ecosystem. The only thing I wanted to add to that, because we have mentioned Nikita Beer, and I found that hilarious to see, is that you can book a video call with Nikita. A 60-minute video call is 10 grand. He's charging 10K for a 60-minute call. But the good news is it's discounted from 11.2K or whatever the original price is that's shown on the website.
Good for him. I like it. I think it's good. Yeah, but I mean, as you said, for the people who don't know, he's like a super viral app creator. Sold one startup to Facebook, sold the other one to Discord. had a history of, I watched a whole interview with him once. It was pretty interesting. Had a whole history of like building apps, failing over and over again, just like kept trying to build viral apps. And then hit these two and had these two huge exits. So well done to him. Okay, final question, Ledge, before we move on. We've got some big conversation to have on these Bitcoin treasury companies are super interesting. So I want to talk to Stats about that one. And then we've obviously got the Coinbase news as well, which I think we're all kind of interested in. Internet capital markets, I don't know if you directly answered the question. I think what your answer to Sam was correct, which is kind of just the same game that we've been playing, wrapped up in a different set of branding. Is this one that you want to participate in some way? Are you going to be checking it out? Final thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. It's speculative. It's fun. There is money to be made there. So I'm going to try to make the most out of it. But I don't believe in its sustainability. And I don't believe that this is the future of fundraising. Or I also don't believe that we need to tokenize everything and bring everything on the blockchain for mass adoption to happen. I think the way to mass adoption is with stablecoins and the crypto payment rails being integrated with many traditional businesses. But nonetheless, it's a great way to make money. So I'll try to be a part of that.
Yeah, fair. I think that's probably most people's
conclusion. No one cares
about
stable coins, Legendary. We just care about money. So don't.
Stable coins are money, Stats. They are money.
No one cares about stable coins. Come on. No one cares about traditional financial rails. All this gobbledygook.
We can. It's when the number goes up, it's good. Okay. Let's get into the Coinbase news. Ledge, do you want to set up what's going on there? I think that's pretty interesting. For a long period of time, we started wondering whether the best bet for crypto was to get out of ETH and into Coinbase because of its successful, just how it was positioned in the States, how it's printing on base fees, for example. This is I'll let you do the news. What do we need to know here?
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty massive news, actually. Coinbase is joining the S&P 500 index. The stock is also up 8% on this particular piece of news, and had reached $225-ish in the aftermarket yesterday. It's still down from the all-time high of $340 that it had reached in December. However, it is very significant because it is the first pure crypto firm to be in the S&P 500 index. There is other companies like Block, PayPal, and Visa that do provide crypto services that are part of the S&P 500 already, but it's not their only business. Also, MicroStrategy is not part of the S&P 500 because it's just too small of a company in terms of market cap to be a part of the S&P 500. And for those wondering what it takes to join the index, you need to have positive earnings in the most recent quarter, and the sum of the prior 4 quarters also needs to add up to positive earnings, which is now both criteria now fulfilled by Coinbase, and size-wise, they also now fit in the largest 500 companies, so they will join the index, and that will happen before the end of May.
MicroStrategy is actually a bigger market cap than Coinbase.
Is it?
Double as big, yeah. It's like $100 billion versus 50. But it's not really an operational business.
So do we like Coinbase here? How's Coinbase doing? So I'm looking at the chart. It's actually got pretty beat up. Everything was obviously beat up in the last few months or so. It's at the same level that it was maybe September 24, November 24. Higher than its lows throughout 2022, 2023. Any thoughts here, Stats?
I mean, look, I think it's not. I mean, to be an S&P 500 company, you have to be, as Legendary said, you have to be profitable for a quarter and for a year. So it's it's something that's always. It's not nothing, and the S&P 500 does want to have sector like representation from various sectors. So there's a subjectiveness to it. And I think there is a bit of a statement here that crypto is part of the economy and the S&P 500 wants to capture that. And I think that's all real. As far as it as a stock, I don't understand the stock well enough. I think we all think of it as a consumer stock. And from a consumer's perspective, I would not want to own it. And I say that because I just think so much of, if people call you and ask you how to buy Bitcoin, the first thing I'll say is buy the ETF or second thing I'll say is buy it on Robinhood. I just think these other options Coinbase was great. I think Coinbase actually benefited in some way from the barrier to entry to crypto. And now as it's becoming so easy to get access to crypto, I did like Coinbase is not the stock I want to own. So it just feels like a bit of a secular, like of a niche bet kind of as far as how the US ecosystem for buying crypto is evolving. And we have an administration right now and a movement right now to make crypto easier to buy, which I actually don't think benefits Coinbase. Now, I guess the flip side is I don't really know what their business is. Like, I don't know if this is like Amazon AWS, where everyone thought of Amazon as like where you go to buy, toys, but really like their cloud business was what was driving their earnings and their profitability for a decade, and you just didn't think of that as a consumer. I don't know if Coinbase, who I'm sure is extremely nimble and thoughtful here, but like if they're stablecoin business, if they're kind of like security business, if they're institutional storage business, like if those are really what's driving earnings, I just don't know the business well enough to have a strong view. But from a consumer bread and butter, I'll charge you 1.5% to get in and out of Bitcoin, which is what they've been doing for the past while, for the most basic users. Like that just feels like a dying business.
Yes, I think that's correct. And the other thing I think that lots of people thought they had a moat was when BlackRock and the various ETF providers were going around establishing their custodians. I think people were super bullish. It's like, oh, it's Coinbase only. That's so amazing. But then just, I think a month ago it was BlackRock added Anchorage as a custodian of its Bitcoin as well. So it's like, that is also something that is kind of slightly eroded and is not as pure in some sense.
AWS had tons of competitors as well, but there's still something massive about that.
Sure.
I don't think the existence of competitors makes it a bad business, but it's certainly not as fun as a monopoly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Funky, your hand is raised. Give us the final take on Coinbase. I know you are a big coin bull. Final take here before we get into the final piece of news on these Bitcoin treasury companies.
Yeah, thanks, B. It's funny. Brad tagged me last night. I actually put his post down in the comments below and my response, and it's something that you guys just touched on. So, I bought in Coinbase when it was like $50 or something because I just thought like fundamentally this is too low for as much as they do for the industry. I'm a huge proponent of Coinbase. I use it as my sex because they fought so much for the industry. So it's partly just like moral support for why I want to be involved with Coinbase and continue to use the platform. However, my one concern was just what you guys noted insofar as, they had kind of cornered the custodial market when you think about the massive amount of fees. And the other thing, too, that also people focus a lot on their bottom line in terms of just like the fees that they're earning on trading. That is not their bread and butter. You also have to remember that in addition to their custodial service, they have a massive business in what's called Coinbase Cloud, where they run validator operations, much like we do for blockchain infrastructure. Those things literally print money. So there's also that aspect. Has the stock underperformed compared to expectations that Brett and I had? Probably. And I think I agree with Sam 100% insofar as like no one's going to come and take away the custody business. You're going to see this with institutional players. This is our own pitch at Global Stake. We tell people like not only are we bare metal, but you want to just diversify your counterparty risk and your stake. You want to spread it out to other places. So it makes perfect sense that BlackRock would engage with Anchorage Digital. Now, if they lose the commanding lead that they have in this regard, and I know the guy who actually works at Coinbase and oversees all the ETFs and the custody, he's a really cool dude, but I think that's the real thing. Can they maintain a foothold where there's still the dominant player in the custodial services for the ETFs? Then I have no concerns, and I think it's a good fundamental bet. Versus like MicroStrategy, I even said to Brett, like I'm even starting to think about maybe selling some of my MicroStrategy because it's becoming so over levered as a bet on Bitcoin, which I never thought I'd see that day. Whereas Coinbase, I'm totally comfortable. I got in so low that I'll just continue to keep it as part of the portfolio in the Roth IRA.
Okay. Interesting additions. Thanks for leading us into the MicroStrategy talk. We're not getting into MicroStrategy itself, but I guess the final headline for the day. Definitely want to touch on this Bitcoin Magazine news where the CEO announced a merger with a healthcare company to create a public company focused on the Bitcoin treasury strategy. It's a merger with a Utah-based healthcare services provider with $710 million of funding through private placement and convertible notes to establish a Bitcoin treasury. Obviously, this is interesting because it's another example of corporates wanting to take a page out of the Saylor strategy playbook by raising funds to buy Bitcoin. which has so far, well, at least in Strategy's case, had positive effects on share price, and other companies that have announced similar things have managed to have a positive effect on the share price thus far. Though, as Funky was maybe alluding to, Strategy are getting kind of over levered. Other companies are, popping up more and more. And the question I think on people's minds is this going to continue? Is it as easy as a company just announcing you're going to become a Bitcoin treasury company and instantly becoming a more valuable company? Just for a bit more context, though, the CEO has said, this is of Nakamoto, which is, I think, the Bitcoin holding company involved. He said Nakamoto's vision is to bring Bitcoin to the center of global capital markets, packaging it into equity, debt, preferred shares, and new hybrid structures that every investor can understand and own. He actually had a tweet just a minute ago. I'm just going to find it because I think that was kind of, if I can find his account. Can I find the account if I spell his name right? Maybe. I can't spell his name right. I don't know what his handle is at the moment. Okay, it doesn't matter. Interestingly, this is a very beautiful aspect of the deal, which I think not a lot of people will necessarily note. The transaction includes the assumption of Nakamoto's marketing services agreement with Bitcoin Inc., which is the entity involved with Bitcoin Magazine, which is a really beautiful scenario, right? So you can get paid the management fee for running the company. You can hopefully your share price can appreciate, so you get paid in that way. And if you're the owner of the media company, you can get paid via the media as well. So I think that's quite a nice way to be able to establish this sort of operation. And in this specific case, the KDLY shares, which is the ticker, because Kindly MD was the healthcare company, they were up 250% on the news to $13.69. Ledge, I want to come to you first here. Thoughts on the proliferation of these Bitcoin treasury companies? We also had the Tether, SoftBank. Who's the other one involved in that? Tether, SoftBank, Cantor partnership. What are your thoughts here? Then want to come to Stats and Rahim as well.
Yeah, David Bailey also had posted a goal is to run the MicroStrategy playbook in every country. We'll see each of them off the Nakamoto balance sheet. Our Bitcoin yield will be a multiple on a multiple. I'm a bit torn, to be honest. On the one thing, I love the Bitcoin Treasury website and I love seeing more and more companies holding Bitcoin. But I'm more of a fan of an operational company that decides for whatever reason they want to have a bit of exposure to BTC and hold that, because that is per se a cool move. I'm not really the biggest fan of these companies just being set up or spun up to acquire as much BTC as possible. I can understand it like from a like TradFi company perspective that then wants to lend and borrow and offer services to other Wall Street companies. But I just don't think that this is, it's just not something that really excites me. Like, it's cool that this buying pressure is happening, but I don't really see the point of that. And I don't really see the point of that when those companies will then trade at an absurd multiple relative to the Bitcoin that they're holding. So it's skeptical to that. But on the one hand, on the other hand, it's additional buying pressure. And that is not something to shy away from. But I don't really see the point in most of those.
I think I'm of the same view. Just going round the table here, Rahim, what are your thoughts? Is that an interesting proposition for you as an investor? Then maybe we'll come to Stats from a corporate perspective, if any of this makes any sense.
Let me take an opposite take to what Ledge was saying. I think when you have companies like this, it's almost like you have a group of people who are almost like doing sales pitch for Bitcoin to these companies and stuff. Because the other argument is like, why wouldn't these companies like end up buying some sort of like a treasury or owning Bitcoin on itself, whether it's Airbnb or Spotify or whatever? But then you have like whether it comes to like ETFs, whether it comes to like companies like this, you almost have like, like Michael Taylor is like, he literally lives, breathes Bitcoin. Every picture he's creating memes out of it or whatever. So that's all obviously on like the silly side. But I think he does like a great job of like selling that vision. And I feel like there are traditional companies on the tech front, on the pharmaceutical front or whatever, that I feel like rather than assuming that these people are progressive enough to take the time and effort to educate themselves on actually custodian Bitcoin themselves, that if there are companies that can actually go and pitch and why this is like a better investment opportunity, or why is this different from gold, or do we see this as like liquid gold, I actually think it helps the vision a bit better in some way.
Okay. Interesting take. Coming to you, Stats, you had this tweet yesterday, I believe, where you said these Bitcoin holding companies will trade at a discount to NAV sooner than people think. What's your thinking here, and just on the general movement of people moving in this direction of just trying to spin up companies to buy Bitcoin?
I mean, look, I saw a deck over the weekend for someone trying to raise money for one of these companies, and they basically say, "Give us $100 million, and the market will pay $150 million." And if it's that easy, it will not last. It's just a ridiculous thing that the market will. And now, I personally think they should. So just from a fundamental perspective, if it's this easy to just turn $100 million into $150 million, thinking the market will pay more for a holding company, then enough supply will come out that it will disappear. And you're already seeing that. Like, there's just too much supply. We saw it with SPACs. I mean, why do I think it? But ultimately, even excluding the supply issue, I think these things should trade at a discount to NAV. And just to explain what NAV is, net asset value. So, if you get $100 million by Bitcoin, right now it's trading in the public markets for $150 million. I think it should trade at at $80 million or $90 million. And the reason is, why do what gives it its value ultimately? It's that the company, if they need to, can sell the Bitcoin and return you the capital. So it probably shouldn't trade at a discount to NAV. But something like MicroStrategy, Saylor can't sell. He owns 3.5% of Bitcoin. The minute he starts to sell, let's say he needs to get cash to pay people out. The minute he starts to sell, the entire market's going to flee. And he basically can't. He owns too much. And if he actually really needs capital, everyone's going to want to front run him and sell the minute he sells that first Bitcoin. And it's pretty hard to find an OTC deal to buy for someone who's going to buy 3 to 5% of all Bitcoin. So I think these companies should trade at a discount because you can't really get the cash back. So like ultimately it's really worth less than the current Bitcoin price, because you're going to have to sell it at a discount to the current Bitcoin price. And I think that that's ultimately where we go. But we saw with GBTC as well. Like, if you look at the Grayscale ETFs, they were once the only way people could get access kind of in public markets to Bitcoin. And they started by trading at a 40% premium to NAV. But, by the time the ETFs came around, like in the year going up to that, they traded at a 30 to 40% discount. Like, these things and the sentiment towards these types of kind of financial engineering structures, not that there's much engineering going on, it's just taking advantage of this weird paradigm in the market that they want to overpay for these things, can change very, very quickly. And I think here you don't even have a narrative. Like, with the SPACs, you had a narrative. Like, you could say, no, QuantumScape is changing the world of batteries. No, like, whatever, DraftKings is the companies that SPAC, actually you could build narratives that could get people excited and create more about. Like, here you can get Bitcoin by buying IBIT. IBIT.
So this is the thing, right? It's become so easy now via the ETF.
It's so easy to get Bitcoin. So if there was a time where people couldn't get access to Bitcoin, then maybe you have a narrative like, no, this should trade at a premium because it's the only way people can get Bitcoin. Right now, anybody who has a Fidelity account or an account on E-Trade or an account on any of these things, other than Vanguard, but anyone who can buy IBIT, which is a publicly listed ETF and gives you instant access to Bitcoin with zero trading fees, zero. And, and a slight fee over the course of a year. So you have no need to buy these. There's really no narrative other than the market's doing it already, which is a really bad narrative. I'm going on Pio's podcast on Wednesday to understand it better, because he's the biggest bull for all this stuff. I guess Wednesday's tomorrow, but there's no narrative here. There's no narrative. There's infinite supply, and the natural economics should be on the other side of the premium discount. Like, ultimately, over time, that's where we're going. And I think and the speed of supply right now, I think we're going there sooner than later, because there's not much to keep it above. There's no narrative. And I'm getting these DAX sent to me, and I'm just a nobody. I mean, saying your 100 is going to go to 150 in a week. Like, no, like that. Those are the top signals.
I'm kind of with you there. Ledge, what did you want to say?
And even in the few cases where like a multiple to the NAV would make sense, like MetaPlanet, I think Bitcoin tax, they want to change it in Japan. It's like what, 50 something percent. Capital gains is way lower than that. And you would have this option to buy BTC via buying Metaplanet stock and then save on taxes. But it doesn't make sense because now Metaplanet is trading at a 3x multiple, 3.2x multiple to the NAV of the BTC that they're holding. So that premium is way too high to have any tax saving effect that would make any sense at all. So it's still cheaper to just buy BTC and pay the higher taxes than buying Metaplanet right now.
Yeah, and look, I like there when it's a one-player market and people, then it's easier for the narrative to spin up. Like it's very easy to spin up a narrative on Saylor because he's a very unique person and he can say he's going to become some Bitcoin bank and all these different things that are hard to refute. And and we're kind of in a huge bull market for Bitcoin if you actually look at any longer-term trend. For Metaplanet, if that's like the one player. But in a world where you're getting new $500 million companies spinning up every single week, that's how the bubble pops. Is when the money becomes so easy and other people say, wait a second, I can do this too. That's when you start to realize that the narrative to drive the premium doesn't make much sense. I think when it's just one player, you can kind of get the guys like Pio out there screaming about how different it is, or Metaplanet, like, oh, this is the best way to get a tax advantage, and during bull markets, those narratives rip. I just can't see it sustaining in a world where multiple players are jumping on board and you have to sustain a lot of them. Like I think that brings down everybody. I mean, it's good to Rahim's point. It's not bad for Bitcoin price, but if the reason these guys are buying Bitcoin is because they think they're going to put in 100 million and get 150 million back when Bitcoin stays flat, like that's hardly even real buying. That's just people who think they have an arbitrage, and clearly it's not. Maybe it's a short-term arbitrage, but it doesn't seem sustainable.
Yeah, it's very helpful to know how some of those conversations are going. I was speaking to some people out in Dubai as well, and it feels like some people with a lot of money are really want to get in on that trade, basically, because I think exactly to your point, that's the line of thinking. It's look at the other people who've done it. It's easy money. We need to do the exact same thing. And a lot of people are obviously trying to connect those dots as soon as possible. Look, I think we have run out of time for today's show. The two things I would say just to wrap it up is first, the next line of thinking, I guess, is if this is we as a Bitcoin holder, the line of thinking we need to explore, maybe when we have more time or just in private, is okay, if this is the path that we're going to go down, and it seems like we're going down this path at the moment with all of these companies getting spun up, a lot of Bitcoin buying pressure coming in. That's also how the bubble pops. If that's how we are thinking about it, what are the downstream consequences of this? So that's like something I want to be thinking about a lot more, because I don't think it would necessarily be good for the smaller companies. And the second one is just a tip. We've been speaking about it on the show a bunch. If you are looking to buy Bitcoin, I've said it for a while now, one option available to you if you would like to get some hyperliquid exposure is to buy it on Hyperliquid via Unit. Unit is like this quite important protocol, which is bringing these assets to Hyperliquid. I think that they will do an airdrop at some point. It's not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed. That's the direction I think they're going in, and doing spot volume for Bitcoin is probably a good way to do that. I think it's one of the cheapest ways to buy Bitcoin as well, I think, at least on chain. So that is something to keep an eye on. And technically, a little announcement, we are now, the Modern Market is a Bitcoin treasury company, because yesterday, Legendary, I bought our first set of Bitcoin. We've never done anything funny with our treasury, just like kept dollars all the time. But I told you, it wasn't by mistake, but there was like a small amount that I had in the Modern Market abstract wallet, and I didn't even have a personal abstract wallet yet. And I saw Dith's cat go live over the weekend or on Friday. I was like, I need to buy this right now. So I took there's only like $100 in the Modern Market abstract wallet, or $200. Just chucked it in. It 20x'd. So we had like a nice amount of Bitcoin. Well, we had a nice amount of dollars. And I was like, right, this goes to Bitcoin now. And now that's how we've started our Bitcoin treasury.
I want Saylor style announcements on the Modern Market X account of fractions of BTC that we buy.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do that. But in future, no more meme coin trading off the modern market with the modern market treasury. So unless you're gonna be in charge of that. Okay, good stuff, guys. That's a great show. Super interesting. I think we get look, there's always these meme coin stuff going on. There's more launch pads all the time, but there's these bigger, interesting conversations, and I think we had 2 of those today really nicely. So thank you so much for joining. As always, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour live on X Video, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Thank you so much to my co-hosts, Legendary, Stats, and Rahim. We'll be back again with you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Take care, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.